Welcome to the Love Psychologist podcast, a place where you'll understand your relationship, partner, and yourself on a deeper and more satisfying level. You'll learn to create happy, fulfilling, and lasting relationships. And here's your host, psychologist and award-winning author, Dr. Paulette Sherman.
Hi there, it's Dr. Paulette Sherman, the host of this podcast, The Love Psychologist. Thanks for joining me. We're going to start a new series in this podcast, and it's going to be about that negative voice in your head and how that stops you when it comes to your relationships. In this podcast in general, we've been talking about how relationships are important to be viewed from the inside out and how your relationship psychology really affects the way you interact with others, especially in your romantic relationships, whether you're single and dating, in a long-term relationship, or in marriage. And so today we're going to start to focus in this series about how your negative thinking from the inside out then colors what you do and how you feel in your relationships in particular and in life in general. So I first want to start out by talking to you a little bit about what a gremlin is. You might think of it as kind of like a furry little monster, but it isn't really that scary once you start to develop a relationship with it, because I say that we all have a gremlin, no matter who we are. It's sort of that negative voice in your head that tries to keep you safe, to stop you from the pain of being judged, to prevent you from making mistakes, or even to ensure you that you need to kind of remain safe and invisible and remain under the radar so as not to stir up any trouble. And really, it's the voice of fear versus love. And it wants you to stay with what's familiar so you won't be hurt and to resist any change or growth. But the key is that it really will say anything encouraging or good. So hopefully I have you guys nodding here and you recognize that this does happen to you. In fact, I think it was said once that most of us have 25,000 to 50,000 negative thoughts per day. So I don't know if you've ever had the assignment to count them. It's probably impossible, but you can actually sit down and write down the recurring ones that you have. Most of us have several recurring negative thoughts or patterns, and then that says something about us. So it is helpful. What are the things that you're negatively focused upon in your significant relationship or in dating, and do they recur again and again? And then you can start to sort of put them on loudspeaker and challenge them. So we'll talk about that later. But basically, what else I wanted to say about the gremlin is that some say it's the internalized voice of the critical parent or the authority figure or of our society. And in fact, Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst, described the superego as internalized standards that were aimed at perfection, aiming to make a person to act morally. So however you see that we probably created this idea, this internalized gremlin, there are different ways to view it. But the main thing is to not let it shape your whole life and get you by the throat, and to develop a more congenial relationship with your gremlin where you're taking charge, your higher self, I'd like to say, or the part of you that makes choices and decisions based upon love. So that's what we're going to explore more in this series. So I want you to think for a moment about how you might handle a really negative person in your life. One idea is you might decide to set some boundaries with them in terms of how often you spend time with them or for how long. You might begin to challenge them instead of just internalizing what they're saying to you about if you don't agree with it. You might spend some time away from them and choose more loving people to associate with. And if you had to spend time around them, you would also strengthen your inner loving voice first. So that would be the one you follow. So even if you didn't choose to say something to them, let's say you have some aunt that's telling you, and you're single, telling you that you should really get married soon, or you're going to be really unpopular and everyone's going to think you're odd. Well, maybe you wouldn't say anything to her directly, but you might talk to yourself ahead of time and say that you're wonderful and you're choosing this and that you're self-partnered and that you have a great life and the right person will come around later. So those are just some ideas. I'd love to hear from you as we go in this series, in this podcast, about what you would suggest. What ideas do you have when you have that negative voice occur, and how do you begin to combat it and go back into a place of love instead? So if you do ever want to comment or give me some ideas of what worked for you, you can go to my website, drpaulettesherman.com, and there's a contact form, and you can write me with the subject Gremlin in it. And I'd love to hear from you guys, because I'm hoping we're developing a community and an interaction here. So these are some ideas about generally what is a gremlin and what are some ways to begin to think about challenging it. And I just wanted to give you a couple quick examples of how the gremlin can really wreak havoc in people's everyday lives. Sheila was a woman in her 30s who was successful at work and had a boyfriend, friends, and a family she loved. Her life was pretty good, except her gremlin never wanted her to make any mistakes. So when she bought something like a quilt or a toaster oven, she'd spend days reconsidering whether she should keep it or not. So for her, shopping became fraught with self-condemnation, and she berated herself for every mistake. Lonnie was a beautiful single woman who wanted to date, but her gremlin would say to her that she just couldn't do it until she lost 15 pounds. Her gremlin told her that no man would like her being overweight, and it told her that in New York, men only liked women in careers who were making over $75,000 per year. Kira was another person who did well at work, and her boss loved her. But her gremlin constantly told her that she was going to screw up any time now, and she would look really stupid. It scared her, and it stopped her from sharing her ideas at work and taking risks to move up the ladder, or to even be confident of her many existing skills. I could go on. I could go on with like 100 quick examples, but I think you're probably thinking of some of your own, of people you know, or things with yourself in terms of what kind of gremlins stop you from moving forward. And as a therapist, one of my jobs is to really catch this gremlin in action and to put that sabotaging voice on loudspeaker so that it can begin to be heard. And I try to help my clients to challenge it so that they can become their own best advocate and change in ways that they desire and that serve them better. So when I work with clients, often the first thing I point out is that this gremlin is not them. It's just a negative voice that is not actually them or their higher self or their true self. It's a voice they've internalized, and that's trying to stop them from doing what's best for them. And once they recognize this, they then have a fighting chance to begin to challenge it. And it's just changing that track and adding a new one. And so in this series, and in a book that I wrote a teeny little book for my clients that's called The Gremlin, 10 Tools to Shush That Negative Voice in Your Head. And it's available on Amazon. It's like the kind of book you can just stick in a briefcase or a purse, very light, and you can just pull it out to memorize the 10 tools that we're going to go over here. And of course, there are many more, but I just wanted to make it simple because we all have such busy lives. So if you're interested in the book, again, you can go to Amazon, type in Dr. Paulette Kaufman Sherman or Dr. Paulette Sherman, The Gremlin, and it should come up. It's available both on Kindle and in little paperback. So today we're just going to go over a couple of these tools, and then in future podcasts we'll go over others so that you can really begin to use them in your life, and I hope you'll find it helpful. So we'll go over the first one today. It's called Challenging Your Gremlin Through Active Imagination. And I want to say that Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, described active imagination as a meditation technique where the contents of your unconscious are translated into imagery and separate entities. And he said that this process led to wholeness and could be done by visualization or by automatic writing. So what does this fancy stuff mean? Basically, you're just going to have like this internal dialogue, which sounds weird, but we do it all the time anyway, but with our gremlin to make it conscious. Instead of it kind of being in the background noise, kind of bringing you down and kind of scaring you, you're going to kind of put it on loudspeaker by having a dialogue in writing. And what does this look like? All I want you to do is take out a little journal or a pad, or even do it on your notepad on your phone, and label G for gremlin, and then it's going to be AS for adult self. And basically, you're just going to start writing out like an imaginary dialogue with what your gremlin would want to say to you. So basically, an example could be, Marissa's invited to be a guest on television to speak about her book, and her gremlin is being super negative. So she begins the dialogue. G for gremlin. What do you know about TV, Marissa? You're going to make a fool of yourself. Maybe you should take a class first or you'll ruin your reputation. And then her adult self will respond and say, the only way to learn is to try something. This is a great opportunity and you're trying to ruin it for me, but I'm not going to let you. And what kind of reputation could I ruin? Right now, I haven't taken any risks, and if I continue to live under the radar like you're telling me to, I'll never develop a reputation. So that's one really quick idea. Like a lot of times, if something is more deep-rooted, you would go on a few more times back and forth. Let me give you another one that's more relationship-oriented. Mark wanted to date, but his gremlin was messing with his confidence. So his gremlin would say for G, so you want to ask a girl out, what makes you think that she'll say yes? You've been rejected before, and you've probably made a fool of yourself. What if she thinks you're a stalker? And then his adult self would respond and say, I may get rejected, but I can't hide my whole life. Many men ask women out, so why can't I? As long as I don't reject myself in the process, I can be proud of myself for just trying. As long as I try, it's a step forward. Whether she says yes or no, that's on her. So what happens is you begin to see the difference that the gremlin is not you, it's not the only truth, that there's a way to challenge it and a healthier way. And there's a way for love to overcome fear and to kind of develop a relationship with the gremlin so that it becomes less scary and more known. So that's just an example of the very first simple tool that you can do just in your journal on your phone, where you write out the date, you write out whatever worry or situation is coming up for you, and you just do this quick dialogue. Probably takes less than 5 minutes, where you write G for gremlin, talk about what it's saying to you, and then challenge it so that way you can move forward in love and take risks. And again, before I end this episode, I just want to bring it back to relationships and give you another quick example. So let's use a person called Melissa. Melissa had a very few boyfriends or sexual experiences, and she thought that nobody would ever want to go out with her because it was weird at this point. She was older, and she thought that would be the main deal breaker for people. So when she did this exercise, let's say G for gremlin, the gremlin would say, nobody wants anybody who doesn't have experience at this age. It's too late for you. Once that comes out, or if they find out or they ask that question on a date, then they're going to end it. And that would stop her before she even began. But then she started to challenge it, and her adult self, that voice and that loving voice became louder. And she would say, well, maybe it's more important to me than it is to them. I won't know until I start telling people. And also, some people might even be happy if I had less other partners and less sexual experience. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be good. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be a great girlfriend or wife. Maybe there's another way to see this. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's the case, and people still get married and have great relationships. And as she did this, she started to take more control in a loving way and guide her relationships in the way that she wanted it to go, and her self-esteem rose, and she became less anxious and more open to possibilities. So that's one example. It's a really simple tool, but I hope you'll try it before you listen to the next episode, and I'll teach you more tools as we go in this series. And thanks for listening, and I will look forward to any comments or any questions. And again, you can reach me on my contact form on my website, drpaulettesherman.com. I wish you the very best in love. Bye.
You've been listening to tips on how to create great relationships from the inside out with host Dr. Paulette Sherman. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe for future episodes here and rate this podcast. You can find more information at Paulette's website, drpaulettesherman.com.